I have a lot of respect for old people, older people, not old people. I've got to be careful with my language. That English language mucks me up all the time, and that trickery of one word here and there. But I have a lot of respect for people that are older than me, because they've lived through things that I can't learn yet. They can teach me things about life that are going to help me get through the ups and downs. Because the truth of life is, it's not just a beautiful green paddock with all these beautiful roses, you know. You don't skip down the road, happy ending. No, life is like this, up and down, up and down. I've been through my fair share, but I've put myself through my fair share. I've been married for 30 years and we're still alive. Don't tell her that. But she's a wonderful woman, and we've had 5 children. And I don't know how she does it. I reckon she has a counselling clinic with my kids on the side, because I can't speak to them the way she can. You know, she just has that mum. She just knows how to do that emotional stuff really well. But a lot of my old teachers, not just Aboriginal people, men or that, they weren't taught about love. They weren't taught about care, and they weren't taught about emotion. Their way of looking after a family was to go to work and earn money and put food on the table and pay the bills. I only seen my father cry at the age of 83 for the first time in my life. And no one knew what to do. My brothers were there, my sister was there, and I gave him a hug. Tears are not a weakness, they're a strength, and they're meant to be shed. That's why we have them. That's part of your healing. And healing is an everyday journey. You don't get better in one day. It's a practice. How you get better and how you grow that. I'm growing a lot of young trees through what I've lived through. But I always love to have them old trees with me, or older trees with me, to help grow them young trees so they don't grow too quick. A lot of young trees talking too much, too quick. They don't know how to slow down. They've got all the answers because Dr. Google is very quick. 2 minutes and you got the answer, instead of sitting there and waiting for the answer or going through something to get it. So look, I think I'd be real close to time. I hope you have understood. I'd love to sit with you again. Anywhere, anytime. This is what I do. I live and breathe this stuff. I've been taught to do this. I've been taught to spread the good disease. Contaminate people with the good disease. Awareness. Thank you. And in my language, Nachatang Nunga is through the mother. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. That was absolutely heartfelt and really touched, certainly I know it touched everyone here, certainly touched me. And I also wish we could be around a campfire instead of this building. Maybe sometime in the future we'll organise a big campfire somewhere. So thank you for that. One sentiment that really came out for me, and of course we will, I should mention that we will actually have questions after all of the speakers have spoken, if that's okay. So if you've got a question for Dean, maybe if you could just hold on to it. But one of the things that definitely came out for me was respect, the importance of respect for each other, but also for our planet. So thank you again, Dean. Thank you. All right, now I'd like to introduce our next speaker, David Curtis, and David's talk is actually titled Using the Visual and Performing Arts to Encourage Pro-Environmental Behaviour. So please welcome David Curtis.
Thanks, Louise, for that welcome, and thank you, Uncle Dean, for the lovely acknowledgement of country, and I'd like to pay my respects to the traditional owners also. So I thought I'd talk today about the visual and performing arts and how they shape environmental behaviour, and I thought I'd end with a model that I came up to describe ways of looking at the arts and their effect on people's attitudes to the environment. But I thought today what I might do is just describe how I got to that model. I grew up in northern Victoria in the town of Wangaratta. My mother was a really keen native gardener and established a beautiful garden over 60 years. And she was a very strong conservationist. She worked for many years in bush regeneration. They had a big ecological restoration project in Wangaratta that Mum led for about 20 years. And her father also was a very strong conservationist. He was a founding member of the Victorian National Parks Association. So I grew up with people who love botany, love nature, and when I went to university, I went up to Armidale in the Northern Tablelands, and I did trained to become a botanist there. And after we had our first child, we moved back there in 1981, and many of you may know that New England has had this terrible problem of New England dieback, a rural dieback, where millions of trees died, particularly in the 1970s, and that continues today, really. Waves of it comes through still. So I wanted to work on the dieback, in particular, that's just near Urella. I was particularly interested in regenerating the trees into those landscapes. So I did a 10-year research program on eucalypt regeneration, and did a lot of the early tree planting trials in the region as well. When in 1983, which was the National Year of the Tree, you can hear me okay down the back, can you? Yeah. The National Year of the Tree, 1983, we formed the Arboreal Tree Group, and it started in our backyard when our eldest daughter was in nappies, and it's continued very rapidly during the 90s. It got to the point where we'd established a large nursery producing about 100,000 trees a year, and it's gone on from there. We built a mud brick woodland education centre in Armidale, in the heart of Armidale. And I guess since then, celebrating its 40th anniversary this year, and probably it's established or planted about 3 million trees over that period of time. This is one of the early revegetation projects we did around the Malpas Dam, which is the water catchment supply of Armidale. You can see it was pretty denuded, and we planted all the eastern side of the dam. And it was the first really successful native tree planting program on the New England, because up until that point, people were only planting pine trees because they'd had such difficulty growing native trees. In 1990, I became the regional manager for Greening Australia and formed the regional office there. It was just me when I started out in 1990, and I built that up to a team of about 30 people. We did big agroforestry projects, conservation projects, revegetation projects, a big program of community education. I guess a lot of our work was working with the nursery industry, the farm tree nursery industry of the New England, to really grow that, and it did grow very, very successfully over the 90s, and it's still pretty strong. In 2000, I worked out that over that decade of 1990 to 2000, something like 6.5 million trees had been planted by farmers throughout the region, and something like 12,000 hectares had been fenced off for conservation purposes. And that work continues to this day. So I guess a lot of our work, was pretty, pretty straight extension, working with farmers, planting trees and so on. But within my educational programs, I was always drawn to the arts, performing arts and visual arts. And so we incorporated a bit of performance into some of the workshops that we did with farmers. This is a bit of paddock theatre that we did at the first National Tree Fest. And the first National Tree Fest was in the early 90s, and it looked at ways that farmers could plant trees on their farms. And about 6,000 people came to that. event, which was pretty extraordinary really for a rural area. And we did a bit of paddock theatre on the back of a truck. You know, I'm Teresa Green, I've got branches all around the countryside. And is that some kind of land care joke, says Digby Dieback. And I also was quite interested in using the visual arts in different ways. So there's a friend of mine, Rob Ewell in Victoria, who liked to create visual imageries of different scenarios for the landscape. So the top picture was the existing landscape. The bottom one was if nothing was done, trees would continue to die, and you get soil erosion worsening and soil salinity and so on. And this was what he would call the vision splendid, incorporating conservation and revegetation into the farm, into the landscape. This was the view from our place, where we just lived just outside of Armidale, and I got a local artist, Faye Porter, to paint some old blinds, that had been thrown out of that. So that was the landscape she painted, but we also did other scenarios. So one scenario was if we did nothing if we just allowed dieback to get worse, so it was just dead trees, and the next one was if we just planted nothing but pine trees, this is what it'd look like. And then the fourth one was, well, if we did really integrated lots of tree planting with native plants, this is what the landscape would look like. And this is pre PowerPoint slides, so I'd turn up at wool sheds with my blinds as my audio-visual aids and hang them up in the wool shed, and we'd talk about farm planning and different approaches to establishing trees into those landscapes. So I'd kind of been fiddling with some of these ideas as an extension person working with farmers in community education. But in the late 90s, I had the opportunity to be involved in this really major event called Nova Anglica Web of Our Endeavours. Nova Anglica meaning New England. And a local artist and a woman who came to me and said, look, they wanted to put on this program at the New England Regional Art Museum to celebrate the 20 years of land care in the region. The community, in particular farming communities, the work that they'd been doing in land care. The event grew and grew. We brought in a lot of people from the arts, from the sciences, from the catchment management groups, school children, farmers, etc. And in the end, something like about 2,000 people were involved in the event in some way or another. It went for 3 weeks at the Art Museum, and over those 3 weeks, about 5,000 people came to it. And that was not bad for a community of 20,000 people, so about a quarter of the population came to it. And it really excited me to see how using the arts could really motivate and celebrate people's relationship with the natural environment. That was actually the farm where the Tree Fest was held. The Taylor family done these extraordinary plantings. When I came to the end of my work with Greening Australia, I started reflecting on what motivated farmers in particular, and people in the community generally, to want to establish trees on their farms. I spent a lot of time in utes with farmers going around their properties, and farmers are pretty practical in the way they planted trees, why they planted trees, for shelter and shade and timber and honey and so on. But I wondered whether there was some sort of underlying reasoning as well. A lot of the pioneer tree planters that I worked with seemed to have a connection with the landscape that was deeper than just those practical things. So I was kind of interested in seeing where that idea went, and whether the arts in particular could influence people's attitudes to the landscape and to nature.